we will make a start, if that's okay, because I'd like to get through it. Welcome. It's lovely to have you all here. Please, I will try and get to your answers and your answering your questions. If I don't, though, do flip me an email and I'll try and get to it. You can put your hands up. You can experiment with some of those if you'd like to, or chat in the little chat box. I should be able to get your questions as we go along. So here are some links too, as I suggested. Down the bottom left-hand side of the page there is the ADHD Whisperer. That's Selena Lee. She is a firecracker, great resources. A whole heap of different ideas. I'm not going to give you a whole heap of different ideas, and I'll explain why later on today. Now, underneath there, that first link is All Means All. It's got a guide on IEPs. I quite like that one. It's got lots of great ideas. Sue Larkey has educational plans, a real focus on ASD, and that's fine. And she has a podcast and a blog there too, if you can listen to her. No, if you would prefer to listen to that. All right, so I'm just going to move on. I won't do a complete screen because I might just add a few things as we go. All righty, so welcome. I think we've checked most of those things. I do have some rules here. Let's please speak with kindness. Let's question to understand. Hand up to speak. Feel free to type any questions. I'll try to get to them all. Understand we're all at different stages on this journey. That includes teachers and schools. Last week we had some representatives from the Department of Education online. They were checking me out more than checking you out, but that went really well. But I did want to mention confidentiality. If you happen to mention your child or the school or the teacher, I'd really prefer you not to. But if you do, I'd like you to and ask you to respectfully forget that name. And honestly, if you can't, I'd really like you to exit the room now, because we need a safe place to be able to talk. And sometimes those names come out too, and that's okay. Right. I think we can possibly go straight on with, here's a question I'm going to ask about an IEP. No, let's go ahead with that. Type your thoughts into the chat box. What is the purpose of an IEP? I'd love for you to share some of your ideas. Sorry, Fiona, I had you on unmute. You're muted now. Well, I take it you're busy. That's okay. We'll talk about what an IEP is. Look, today, oh, here we go. Thank you. For students with additional needs to be able to access a curriculum in an inclusive classroom environment. Yeah, that's a great aspect. I do like that. Well done. Yes, allows a child to learn with the class, but at their pace. Yes, to allow and to access. That's also a very good point. Thank you for sharing that too. I hope that I cover all those things, and those points I do believe will actually appear in the IEP. At the end of tonight's session, I hope that you have developed a greater understanding of what constitutes an IEP. Feel empowered, fired up perhaps, to advocate on behalf of your child's unique learning needs. Actually, next, we'll be having these webinars every fortnight. Next week is actually how to get an IEP on the table, which unfortunately can be a bit of an issue. And we'll have a few experts and advocates joining us for that one. So what is an IEP? Well, I think we've had that quick chat. It is really about maximising the learning of your child in the classroom. Let's have a look at what I've put up here. Yeah. Oh, look at that, I'm pretty close. Maximising your child's opportunities at successfully engaging and learning on the same basis as their peers. Yeah, sorry, Alex. I wasn't supposed to be having this meeting, this webinar tonight. This is an extra one because I forgot to record it. Next Tuesdays is all about, it's next Tuesday nights, is all about how to get an IEP on the table. Okay, now there's some special wording there that I like to include. The same basis as their peers comes directly from the Anti-Discrimination Act. I think it's important to be reminded about some of those. Reasonable adjustments actually appears in the UN declaration. So I think that's also important to include. I hope we have some more user-friendly information and wording as we go along. But I think it's important to also show where things come from and how they all link it up. They may include several curriculum subject goals. Now, I know when I first started writing IEPs and creating IEPs with a group, they were nearly all curriculum. But that's not the case. There should be a few in there, but it shouldn't actually be all about the curriculum, but how the children are going to access the curriculum. Sometimes kids were in a classroom, but working on something completely different to the rest of the class. That's actually not inclusion. That is another form of segregation. In this inclusion, for instance, if the classroom was doing some work on, say, two-dimensional shapes, and your particular child was, say, a 2E, twice as exceptional, they would be doing some extension work, or you'd hope they'd be doing some extension work on 2D shapes. So it's included in the whole classroom. Lots of teachers talk about differentiating the classroom as well. I mean, that child may go and sit aside, and that can be part of the IEP. But if it's a child's choice, then it's not segregation. That's part of helping them learn. So, some curriculum goals, but differentiation in there too. Perhaps if we had a child who was non-verbal, it may be about reorganising two-dimensional shapes, but it's still on topic with the class. In an IEP, you can expect some SMART goals. Now, I haven't put behavioural goals here on purpose. I've called them social emotional learning goals, fine, as a result of involvement in school-based provided programs. So perhaps there might be some withdrawal to gain some skills that will better help them engage in the rest of the classroom. I haven't put behaviour here because there really needs to be a separation between learning and behaviour. And in my experience, I've found that when you get that IEP right, when it's proactive and you've got something which really reflects the learner's needs, the behaviours that aren't so acceptable in the classroom generally just don't appear. I know some people get gobsmacked and they go, oh, what? That doesn't say there shouldn't be a plan for a meltdown. Look, life happens and there's going to be a trigger one day, but having a plan that's agreed on in the IEP is really important to have as well. And I see no problem with saying, is that finding out whether there's training for teachers and aides as well. Okay, a fair bit in that one. If you would like to say something, or if there's any questions there, I might actually go to you if that's all right. Any comments, thoughts? Sweet, you guys are easy. Well, I mean, you know. Okay, so just moving on. What is an IEP? Well, I think it's really important to set the tone. Start with strengths. What has worked well in the past? What works well? Sometimes teachers and schools are really very particularly busy places. And starting from something good, I think really is important to set the tone too. I suppose in an IEP, we have to be realistic about what we can try and get into an IEP. So tonight, I'm not presenting one IEP and what should be in it, because every child presents differently. And I really believe in the all means all philosophy. There should be one plan for one child. So here are some general things I think should be in an IEP or an IEP meeting. Start with some strengths. I've put down here some of the things that might actually be occurring. And I've done this for teachers and parents. Just go, well, you can see the list there. OT, speech, psychologist, cognitive therapy, tutor, music therapy, art therapy, medication. I think it's really important that teachers and schools are aware of all the things that you do. And there is a huge load of things that you do for a special needs child. And I think, I'd perhaps put this in a ticker box and say, look, these things are underway. These things are occurring. And I've purposely put medication halfway down, because there is so much that can be done. I mean, medication is important, don't get me wrong, I believe, and getting the medication right is important. But I think there's something really important for teachers and educators to realise, that even though they have that medication, they still have an ASD or ADHD mind. The medication, perhaps if I can generalise, is just a stimulant medication that your child might be on, and that is affecting the limbic system, which is helping them make better decisions about the types of behaviour, but they still have an ADHD wired brain. So medication, I think it's important to emphasise to teachers that it's just one step, and the ADHD doesn't disappear, the ASD doesn't disappear. Also important to make that point, because you'll see that there have to be reasonable strategies, reasonable adjustments to support the kids. Now, as a teacher, I made a terrible blunder, and I asked once, why don't you just keep medicating these kids? I only asked once. I know, it's probably embarrassing. It was then I learned about, the sleep issues. I learned. I was schooled quite quickly. A lot of people don't understand that though, and they don't understand the come down. And that's when proactive strategies that are in place help the child get through. I think it's also important to point out to parents that, some parents, that medication isn't the thing which is going to fix everything. It's just one of a part of a range of things that need to be considered. Any questions about that one? I'm starting to think no one can hear me. Oh, please put your hand up and let me know you can hear me. No, all good. Oh, good. Good. Okay. Oh, I'm tearing through it. That's probably because I had Lou on here last time, and we were going a bit more slowly, but that's okay. I hope she's not listening in the background. No. Okay. Some inappropriate humour wouldn't be me without something a little bit inappropriate. Not inappropriate. Good question. What's the way to communicate to teachers that med isn't a cure? You are the expert on your child, and you're more informed about the teachers and their knowledge too. I think perhaps presenting that medication is just one step of 10 or 12 different things that can be undertaken. And perhaps if you're setting up the IEP meeting and you're talking about strengths, you can talk about some of the other things which are happening in your child's life which are getting great results. It might be athletics, cubs, sport, Lego groups afterwards. That could be a way into. I'm hoping that teachers are learning a lot more about medication and inclusivity. So yeah, tricky one. If that doesn't really answer it, feel free to email me or message me and I'll see if I can get to give you some more specific ideas. Yeah. Yeah, ooh, I had a support staff ask me, I hope you don't mind me sharing that, what is my opinion on medication? Well, yeah, absolutely. If you don't want to share that, you keep it to yourself. Absolutely. And, you know, as I tell lots and lots of parents, you are the expert on your child. Trust that gut instinct of yours. It's just so very important. However, having said that, I think it's important to have those conversations about medication to dispel some of the myths out there. And that they are quite, the myths out there are prominent. If I may speak about today, in one of the sessions we had a bit of a sensory break, and I asked the participants, the 30, 40 teachers there, to line up on a continuum. At one end, I said that medication and taking medication has no effect on future drug use. And on one other end of the continuum, teachers could stand up there if they felt or knew that taking medication definitely led to abuse or later drug habits. I was quite surprised that there are a lot of people right up here, a lot of teachers up here who believed it was going to take away their personality. And I quickly said, you just haven't got the meds right. Go back to your pediatrician and keep finding out the answer. But they really felt that it was a pathway to later drug use. So I smashed that myth because it's not true. Not true at all. In fact, the research that has come back has said quite clearly that if children are medicated, then they are less likely to actually experiment with drugs. Why is this happening? Well, if we go back to the old limbic system, oh, my hand disappearing. If we, it's a log in me, talking with my hands. If we go back to the limbic system, it is struggling to get dopamine. It's doing anything to get that rush of adrenaline. So the hyper ones are amongst the ADHD kids are moving, so they're stimulating that part of the brain. Now, that limbic system is like the captain. It decides whether it's a yes, that's a great idea, or no, it's not a great idea. So the executive functioning goes, oh yeah, let's just jump off this high building and see what happens. And the limbic system, because it's not being stimulated by medication, just says, oh, look, whatever, whatever, just make the decision, just do it. So it does it, and then it gets a hit of dopamines, and it goes, wow, hey, let's do that again. So you can actually have lots of risky behavior occurring and drug-taking behavior if they're not medicated too. How do you get across this to people? I think we need to have those open conversations. And people change. and perhaps your information that you have, Keely, could help somebody else understand as well. Oh, right. What is an IEP? Different types of reasonable adjustments. Now, because of Russell Barkley's work, disappears on me. And if you want to do some more research, executive functioning and Russell Barkley, heaps of videos on YouTube. Can I suggest that you read some of his stuff first? Because if you watch his YouTubes, you'll start reading like he speaks. So you may not get through much of the book. Russell Barkley talks about executive functioning and the deficits in executive functioning. Now, when I first started doing IEPs, they were really curriculum-based. But now we're refining and understanding the presentations and the neurodiversity of these kids. We're starting to say, hey, they just have executive functioning deficits in the area of time. So let's have some reasonable adjustments which actually address time. Some children's executive functioning may be based around the literacy, both verbal and written. So let's ensure a reasonable adjustment is that there are only two-step instructions given to a child. And once the child is then on task, then the teacher will go over and explain the rest of the task. It also is important to put those things down there as far as management, because if a child has dyspraxia, verbal or written, if they're asked by a teacher to come over here and explain to me what was happening at lunchtime, the child's going to be anxious for a start, which is going to further impact their inability to express those words. Just being able to make a choice. And because the limbic system is going, just say whatever, they just can't be bothered. Often the teachers will make up their mind those kids are guilty. So perhaps putting that into the IEP will actually stop triggers and worsening situations. Because at the moment, the department is well aware that there is a talk of a class action against the Department of Education because they have been wrongfully suspending disabled students for these reasons, that IEPs weren't put in place, which highlighted the need to talk or manage or present information differently. And suspensions are being revoked, which I think says you've got to have a good IEP in place. The short-term memory really has to be addressed in an IEP if it's an issue. The physicality that some have, and the visual nature too. And I love talking about to teachers that these can be strengths and they can be weaknesses, and we need to use the strengths to help them address the weaknesses. So having a visual clock or a visual timetable out the front of the classroom and that routine can actually be very calming for the kids when it comes to addressing the temporal issues. Yeah. So the types of reasonable adjustments: transitional, after school care, to school, to high schools. Sometimes you get a rigidity of thought in there and understanding, helping kids move on to the next task. Procedural, knowing what to do when, only giving one or two instructions, especially if there's literacy involved there too. Short-term memory. Physical, allowing them to move. Often when we talk about kids having something to fiddle with, I actually take that as a compliment in my classroom when I'm working with kids, because the kids are actually self-advocating. Well, that's the beginning of it. They're seeking that stimulus, whether it be with touch or sound, to help them operate at that level. You see, in that part of that executive functioning is that they're not motivated, they can't stand boredom, and they'll let teachers know they're bored because that limbic system's not helping them at all. And of course, that's completely interpreted as something else. Oh, I completely lost track of how. I was just remembering something interesting from today when I was talking to teachers about it. So these are the types of things you should have in an IEP. Oh yes, there's something there. I can come to you later about that. Yeah, very important to focus on the positive. I probably won't do that. I was going to get you to quickly type in what are the best three things about neurodiverse kids. But before we go on, any questions about what you think should be in an IEP? There is more that I think should be in there, but I think the reasonable adjustments should really be really addressing the executive functioning. Yeah, it's not up to teachers to decide whether children need medication or not. We're not trained in that area. I would hope that they'd be offering OT, speechies, psychologists or pediatric support before that. Okay, moving on. What else is in an IEP? Well, there should be some goals around the learning. That's a good question. What about what to do and not to do in the child's SGO? Yeah, absolutely. Triggers and outlining their triggers or sensitivities or an agreed, I don't know why this is in my notes. It's a very good point. Thank you, Jen. Yes, knowing what the triggers are is really important. And I mentioned it before with behaviour as well. Having an agreed plan, I think, is helpful for the teachers to know, because withdrawing children from class and withdrawing them from school is actually segregation and against the inclusive nature of the inclusive philosophy. So having a plan that gives a child choice to perhaps get the stimulation that he needs. Now, I know not all sensory tents work with some people, but perhaps it may work in that situation. Perhaps your child just needs some screen time. If the child can learn to advocate and say they're starting to, their bucket's getting a bit full and they feel like they're getting to go over the top, then having some time to calm down and to self-regulate themselves is just so important. Now, teachers are really worried because they've got so much curriculum to get through. But I do tend to say, hey, look, if a child needs an hour to self-regulate and calm down, let them have it, because it will decrease the better they get at calming themselves down. They need to be explicitly taught how to do this. You just can't go, I'll go over there and calm down. You know that's never going to happen. It does need some support. And I think it's important to realise those things too. There are a few devices coming out and methods that non-verbal people are using to indicate to their teachers that they are becoming overwhelmed. Secret handshakes, secret messages. I think they're all really good, very good ideas. Should they be both in primary and secondary school? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Are they harder to get into secondary school? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They are, but we're changing. And I think that's becoming quite clear. Having said that, I've got a local school up here who's absolutely spectacular. and then other schools where they won't return my calls either. We're all on different parts of that journey. And you'll sense where your school is and how far you should push and how far not to push. But whether they have a diagnosis or not, they are entitled to an IEP. And if teachers start coming back and saying, hey, well, I'm sorry, we just don't have the funding for that, that's actually their problem, not yours. They are legally required, since the Anti-Discrimination Act of 1992, that they are to provide for the reasonable adjustments to allow children to access learning at the same level as their peers. So there is a whole legal side to that, which we can talk about next week as well. Sometimes schools may need to be reminded or introduced to that, but I'd go gently first. Try and build that relationship first. And I know one of you is just laughing at me going, oh, Simon, that's not what you said to us. Well, that's because I'd had enough of that particular school. And I think they needed a good encouragement. Can we have a say in who? Yes, absolutely. That is a fantastic idea, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Yes, I love to have in an IMP, who is the person that has the strongest relationship with that child, because it's all about relationships. And actually in IEPs, I also like to have time for teachers to build that relationship as well. And I think we need to probably think about how we use teacher aides as well, because it's a teacher's aides in the classroom. I think it'd be marvellous to see the teacher aide take the class while the teacher actually spends time with the child, not necessarily doing anything, but building that relationship, finding out how they went on the weekend, finding out what's happening in their lives. That is a huge investment. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes if they're a runner, which, you know, we get occasionally, if we can teach them some boundary training, and by at least them having to run to this person, I think that's a much safer habit. Look, there's ideal, as my business partner says, there's ideal and there's unreal. We don't want them to run out, but if they're going to run out, at least we've got a safe strategy for them. So yeah, absolutely, great point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, very important to do that too. Hi, welcome. I hope you can hear me. That person who just came in, Anne-Marie. We've actually just got, we've actually really flown through a lot of this, and I think I'm just answering questions at the moment. But there's some really good points, and in fact, I want to add those to these slides too. Yeah, can we nominate the person who you want to be involved? Yeah, we can. I think we also need to pay attention, well, not pay attention, but realise teachers are busy and got their own things to do as well. It's not ideal, but I think it's very important that person is involved as well. And it certainly helps for transition. You know, as I say, it's all about relationships, all about relationships. We need to try and create some time for teachers and our teachers' aides to actually just be with the kids, get to know the kids. That is a huge investment in the smooth running of the classroom as well. Wow, I got through it really quickly. I'm gonna probably ask some questions of you all now. Oh, good. Great. Yes, it was a good question, important one. That's why I love small groups like this, because you can get to the nitty-gritty and talk about some other things. Has anyone had any success? I'm just going back to that other question. Has anyone had any success um, talking about and trying to talk to the teachers about how to intervene to stop a child escalating. Mm. Yeah, look, it's a tricky one. Today, I was talking to teachers about the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum. Well, I certainly meant to talk about that as well. We talked about how in a tantrum, it's all in the eyes, I believe. In a tantrum, the eyes will follow you because they're looking for an audience. In a complete meltdown, children are going into freeze, flight, or fright, freeze, flight, fright. Now, fight, freeze, or flee mode. And their eyes tend to be dilated and they're withdrawing from the situation rather than trying to add to it. Mentioning also to teachers that taking a child out if they're having a meltdown is actually segregation, is a bit of a wake-up call to them. So they will want something in place for that, and that's what we're trying to do. Make them aware of the child's zones of control within zones of regulation, and make them aware. I mean, you know, if the teachers had time to develop a great relationship, the teacher will know if the child's becoming overwhelmed. I think there are some important things to be said for good communication too. Parents being able to quickly text a teacher and say, hey, and I know this is going to add to his emotional load, but we missed the bus this morning. I just dropped him off, but his bucket's probably pretty full. That means that a teacher can react differently, knowing that information as well. They can go, okay, if you need a bit of time, a bit of space, let's get that now before we move on. Let's get your head ready for learning. Yeah, good questions. Mm. Alyssa, do you mind if I unmute you and we can talk about this?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, you're already unmuted. Oh, fantastic. So would you like to describe what the situation is?
Oh, well, I think he kind of puts a block according to the kind of classwork that they're doing, or if he's upset or anything. Mm-hmm. But from the reports that I've received from the teachers is that he will run, and at home, that's what he'll do. He'll walk away and walk upstairs or go wherever, calm down and come back. Yep. But if you prevent him from doing that, he escalates more and more and more and more.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so in a school environment, they're saying, oh, it's a safety, he can't go. But it's just, yeah, exploded.
Yeah, so is the school saying or giving him an alternative? Are they saying run to, say, the assistant principal's office? Or
No. So I didn't know about the IEP. Well, I saw it on the different sites. Mm-hmm. First of all, I saw it on the American site, so I thought it was an American thing. So I called the Ministry of Education and I asked them if there's anything like an IEP here. And they were like, oh no, and yeah. So it's only in the last few months I found out that, you know, this is a legal thing that schools should be doing. So now I've moved him to a new school, and that's why I'm really interested in this, because I want to bring it up with them so that we set the stage for him. But this new school has been a little more proactive. We ended up doing speech pathology assessment, so he will have speech therapy during the week in school. Still need to find out how that will work, but they're going to work with the teacher, get him to do the therapy, and then send him back to class. So yeah, and they have what do you call them, the learning supports and so forth, which I did not have that before. So it's more promising, but at least I know it's a legal thing in Australia.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, well, the United States does have a 504 plan and an IEP. Unfortunately, even though segregation and inclusion all started in the United States, they haven't ratified. I think there's only 1 or 2 countries in the world that haven't actually ratified the UN resolution. So they don't actually have to provide reasonable adjustments.
Oh, okay.
The ones that do are doing a spectacular job. Look, I've always said with kids, whenever you're working with kids, and sometimes some adults too, you've got to go into their world. Now, and if you can build that relationship up, then the kids are probably going to let you in. But if the child is running, and at the moment we don't have a strategy for that to stop it, and physically holding him or closing the door is only going to lead to an escalation, then that's not helping him, because it's actually working against him. You cannot discipline a child for something they can't control. So if he's in that fight, flight, freeze situation, because of something else that's happened, it's only going to make things worse. So I would be suggesting, look, I don't want him to run, but I think he is going to run if he's going to, and we need a safe place for him to go. And then be leaving it up to the school. So, well, what would be a safe place? Now, perhaps that idea we had earlier on, if there's a teacher that he particularly likes, when he is calm, when everything's okay, if you can set up a collaborative idea that say, look, if you do become overcome, if you're having a meltdown, I want you to run to this particular teacher. Or a particular space. I know in the past when I've had children and they've become overwhelmed and they wanted to do something physically, I used to let them go out to the playground, and I could still have a line of sight and still see them, and they could muck around on the playground. Sometimes teachers will say, oh, well, we can't do that because all the other kids will want it. It's not about fairness.
That's right.
It's educational fairness is getting what you need to succeed. And again, it's just like funding. That's their problem, not yours. If your kid needs to physically get out, then we have an obligation as teachers to ensure that happens. Not escalate the situation.
I got all the excuses, but now I know.
I'm sorry that you have to advocate so hard. Have you heard of Linda Graham's?
I did the course. It was really
I did the course too. I love the way they explained inclusion in those drawings. And to everybody else too, Linda Graham is the guru, one of the gurus of inclusive education. She's up at Brisbane University. And she's just written a book, Inclusive Education in the 21st Century, Policy, Practice and Programs. I know, it's thrilling, right? I know you just want to get out there and read that book because that title, it's just going to get you in. But if you need to advocate, it's got everything in there that you need. You can also download it too. It will show you the UN, the declaration, the Article 4 that you need, the Anti-Discrimination Act. But basically, yeah, they have to provide reasonable adjustments. Funding is their issue, not yours. Community perception is their issue, again, not yours. I hope that's answered your questions for you.
Yeah, it did, thanks.
Excellent, great. I'll mute you there then. Alrighty, what is the course? Oh, right. Oh, that's a good question too. The course, the course, how about I'll try and put a link to the course on my website tomorrow. I can't quite remember it. I did a little while ago, unless someone else can do it. Yes, she does a course. Yep. And it's all about on the book. It's actually a really good precursor to the book as well. Is the funding issue only in public schools? Well, there probably aren't too many issues with the funding. The tricky part with the funding is that sometimes teachers and education believe that it is not a disability. It is absolutely a disability. Don't let them argue down. Sometimes they don't think it's a disability because NDIS don't fund support for it, but it is a disability. Sometimes the funds that they have in schools don't support ADHD. It doesn't mean it's not a disability. It means that more likely the funding could not stretch that far, because it's now 1 in 20 at the moment that we know of that you're going to have in a classroom. But Deloitte made clear a few months ago that 75% of ADHD people have not been identified yet. So that means, you know, in a standard class, you'll have 5 or 6 kids. Anyway, so funding. The interesting thing about funding, and some schools don't know this too, there's a thing called NCCD, which is a National Collection of Consistent Data. I know, great names, aren't they? I think we need to do something about this. Now, every reasonable adjustment a teacher makes, not just for special needs kids, but for any kids, not just diverse kids, neurologically diverse kids, that reasonable adjustment they make to help a child engage in the curriculum can be listed down. And all those reasonable adjustments a teacher makes actually helps the school get some more funding. And so does the Count Me In Too as well. How they allocate the funding, the Catholic schools and the state schools, is actually a little bit different too. Knowledge for Success. You can find it on Future Learn. That's right, it is on Future Learn. Nonetheless, I'll try and put it on the website, www.exceptionallearners, that's with an X, 2 L's in it too. Well, look, that's about it. If I flick back here to the goals tonight, learning intention, I hope that you've got a better idea of what should be in an IEP. Again, if you want specific things for an IEP, I draw your attention to this first page, the ADHD Whisperer. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to share that file with you now. Now, I'm sure if I just move this up here and move this around here, I can work out how to do it. Thank you for your patience. 9:30. I know it's here. It looks like a different one. Different. More. I'm sorry about that. I just can't find it. How about I put another link on it? It's a Facebook link anyway. She's the ADHD Whisperer, and she's got a whole heap of these. But I truly believe you've got to pick ones which actually address the executive functioning of your child. You just can't give all kids blue tacks and expect them to behave, or give them a quiet tent to go to, because it's not going to work with them. You know, headphones. They can work with some ASD kids, and some kids it won't. However, I've seen white noise and music being played in headphones, which does do the trick too. I think you'll find a lot of specific things there in the suggested supports. Sue Larkey will probably have a few of those too, but teachers and you will come up with the best types of support because you are the expert on your child, and you have many things, many strategies already which work. I mean, you knew that if you just let him go and run off and calm down, then he'll return. You know, you're not going to probably find that in any documentation, but it's something you know that works. Trust yourself and back yourself. You are the expert on your child. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that I have answered your questions for you. I certainly hope that you have some more information about advocating on behalf of your child. Perhaps you haven't learned too many reasonable adjustments, but you've got an idea of some of those. Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize all that you do to teachers. Different types. Oh, I think I went through that really quickly too, and I don't think I meant it. Actually, I should just quickly, the IEP meetings, you should have at least 2 a year. I'd suggest 1 a term, especially with younger kids. You can get to approve them or not approve them. They may go ahead, but if you're not happy with them, you can take them home with you and then talk to your network about them as well. There is a site here at the educationnewsouthwales.gov.au which outlines how an IEP meeting should go and what should be in an IEP. But basically, yes, you should approve it. And if a school needs to be held accountable for implementing the IEP too. That's tricky because, you know, sometimes they all start off in a great flash of energy, but does it continue on? Ask them how they are going to ensure it's going to continue. I'd like to see some answers on that one too. Another question about the webinar for next week. Yeah, I haven't booked that up yet. I haven't even done any marketing for that just yet, but I'll be sure to put it on the website. You can also follow me on Instagram at Simon DeRosa Learning Coach, on my Facebook page there as well. You can find Exceptional Learners and Exceptional Learning. I'll be posting it there, and I'll most likely post it in the PAAA and perhaps even in the Whisperers too. Actually, for those people who are in Sydney, I've been invited to speak at Pittwater RSL in February, where I'll actually be covering these points and demonstrating how I explain ADHD to kids. I always have fun doing that too. Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I hope you got something from it. Any questions, any feedback, please feel free to email me. Yes, I am a little bit busy, but I will get to your bits and pieces just as soon as I can. So thank you all. Thank you very much. And good luck. And hopefully we'll see some of you next week too. Cheers. Bye.